Great. Good evening. I would like to call to order the December 6, 2021 Lake Washington School Board Study Session. Let the record reflect that all board members are present and participating remotely. Under the guidelines for attending public board meetings in the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act, the prohibition on in-person meetings is extended, but there is an exemption for public meetings that can, quote, comply with the guidelines for business meetings found in the miscellaneous venues guidance. That miscellaneous venues guidance states that as of June 30, 2021, governing bodies may host in-person public meetings under the Open Public Meetings Act with no restrictions on capacity and no physical distancing requirements. However, all applicable face covering requirements must be followed. This board values public participation and engagement in the meetings of the board. The board will also continue to comply with the laws related to the Open Public Meetings Act and all current emergency requirements related to miscellaneous venues. If the miscellaneous venues guidance and all other requirements related to COVID-19 cannot be met, the board must hold its meetings remotely and provide access via live stream and telephonically. Due to recent non-compliance at school board meetings, the board has determined to hold its meetings remotely. The board will notify the public of the location of meetings through the Meetings tab on Board Docs on the LWSD website. At this time, it is planned that all board meetings scheduled in December, that's this meeting, and the first meeting in January will be held remotely, unless there are changes in the guidance provided. Board meetings, study sessions, and special board meetings will continue to be live streamed on our district website, www.lwsd.org. If you are unable to live stream the meeting, you may call to listen. That phone number is 425-936-2813, conference ID 37127. And as always, you are welcome to also email the board at boardmembers@lwsd.org. The first and only topic for tonight's study session is a discussion of results 3, which is life skills and citizenship, and a discussion on the potential updating of indicators for that results monitoring. Dr. Holman, can you get us started?
Absolutely. And this is, as the board focuses on their policies, this really is one of those policy sets that we've been discussing for years, results 3. When it was end results 3, even then when it transitioned to results 3, we have had ongoing dialogue and discussion for how does the board truly identify the results in the life skills and citizenship area, and what are the best indicators and data to help the board evaluate that policy. And when the board received results 3 monitoring report this last spring, there was discussion and dialogue about, is this really the evidence that helps the board evaluate the organization? I would think the conclusion to that was a simple no. And so here we are tonight for an update and information from Associate Superintendent Matt Gillingham, as he brought forward a concept around the Washington State Social Emotional Learning benchmarks as a way for us to think about results 3. And so Matt has an evening planned for us to truly walk through the policy, the benchmarks, but also for dialogue and discussion, because for us, it's really important for there to be clarity in the policy, clarity in the interpretation, and clarity in the indicators as we think about this critical aspect of a student experience as they go through our school system. So with that, I'll hand it over to Matt as he walks us through the presentation.
All right, thank you, Dr. Holman. I feel very set up with an evening planned with Matt around social emotional learning. But yeah, so just to kind of reiterate some of the things that Dr. Holman shared, tonight we'll be sharing with the board information about the Washington State's social emotional learning standards, and we'll try to structure and provide us opportunities for the board to have a conversation around its interests in this policy. And as Dr. Holman said, it's critically important that we have clarity around the interests and thinking about what that means all the way through how we want to measure it, because that ultimately drives where we're applying our resources, where we're spending our time, as well as providing clarity to everybody throughout the school district about what it is that we're trying to achieve. And so I'll provide us some times where we'll have some conversations, some dialogue, sometimes where wanting to seek any clarity, and then also for us to just talk about what are some of the next steps that the board might have some interest in, or if there's additional information that I can bring back to the board. I'm joined tonight by Johnny Fu, who is our Director of Student Services. I'll be driving most of kind of the presentation and the structure, but Johnny has a level of expertise around social emotional learning that goes beyond what I have, and so I wanted him here to be able to share some context with you tonight, or to be able to respond to questions. So I'm going to jump into a presentation mode. And all right, Dr. Holman, is that coming up on your end?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. All right, so tonight we're going to be looking at the Washington State SAL standards and benchmarks, really in relationship to the board's policy Results 3 Life Skills and Citizenship. And as I think about, well, what are our objectives for tonight? First and foremost, it's to familiarize this board with what those standards and benchmarks are. We've tossed them out, at times over the years when we've talked about social emotional learning, we've referenced them, but we've never kind of gone and spent this much time with the board to actually look at what the state standards are. So tonight's an opportunity to do some learning around those standards. And as I think about the kind of the essential questions that we're trying to wrestle with is, to what extent does our current policy, the ways in which we're interpreting it and monitoring it, really satisfy the board's interest in ensuring that our students are developing the life skills that they need to be able to meet our mission and vision, which is that they're graduating ready to lead a rewarding, responsible life as a contributing member of our community. And in what ways, does the policy and the ways in which we're engaging with that not satisfying? I know last time I was talking about R3 with the board, we had a lot of challenges in terms of how we monitor the policy. So we know at a minimum that the ways in which we're monitoring the indicators that we're using is problematic. And so we'll start with looking at our policy and just having some conversation around that before we dive into the SEL standards. And as we go in to look at the standards, I'd like to invite the board to think about how the standards do or don't relate to what the board's interests were when they adopted the R3 policy. So we'll try to hold those two things. What's our current state, and then what potentially might be a future state as we think about in relation to the SEL benchmarks and standards. I know the board has had a lot of interest around social emotional learning, has talked quite a bit about it, and yet it's not something that we ever explicitly call out in a policy framework. So as Johnny and I were kind of talking about this earlier today. So we're a couple degrees removed where we have to look at kind of what's the board interest through policy, and then kind of say, well, that leads us to X, which leads us to Y. Well, how do we satisfy that? We satisfy that by engaging with social emotional learning. So that's our objectives for tonight. There'll be opportunities where we'll pause to ensure that the board has understanding around the process by which the standards were developed, as well as the standards themselves. We won't do a super deep dive on any individual standard tonight. However, if that's something that the board has interest, we can come back and we'll take your questions and be able to respond to those. All All right, so here's the board's current policy R3, life skills and citizenship. Each student will develop attributes necessary to lead a productive, rewarding, responsible life as a contributing member of the community and greater society. Accordingly, graduates from Lake Washington will be able to do, and the board has identified 12 things that it would like its graduates to be able to achieve. And so you can see the list of the 12 items that are part of this policy. We have, had some challenges in trying to figure out how do we accurately monitor, these items. I'll point out the first two, question and think critically and creatively and solving problems effectively. We have historically, for the past few years, since we moved to a coherent governance model, been using grade data. Academic grade data as a way of measuring or monitoring that as a proxy, and yet the challenges we run into with grades is that's not the only thing that they measure, and there's a lot of other variables in there. So it's kind of a poor proxy for us to be able to say to what extent are our students able to question and think critically and creatively. So at this point, I'd like to open up for the board to engage in some just some reflection and conversation, and probably take maybe about 5 to 8 minutes or so, but just to reflect on what are the things that as the board that you like about the current policy. What are the things that are really kind of you feel are working for us. And what are the areas in which it may not be satisfying some of the interests, or at least the ways in which we're indicating and monitoring?
I'll play traffic cop, since I don't know if Matt can see with the presentation up.
Right.
Mark and then Chris.
Okay. Thanks. Appreciate it. These are all great. I agree with you. The grades aren't everything, and I wish there was some way we could measure their non-school activities, such as if they've got outside jobs, if it's whether it's working at McDonald's, working at a gym, whatever, wherever they might be, because restaurants, because that also shows the ability to solve problems, be able to work with a crowd, work with people that are less than ideal at times. So anyway, that would be great if we could be able to broaden that out. I don't know how, but it'd be great if we could try it. Maybe we can brainstorm some other districts or something, or some local employers might have some ideas. I don't know. The other thing is too, I think this drives home the fact that we are promoting the life skills and citizenship. I think it drives home the need for the Emerson School quite a bit, because those kids are they've had their schooling disrupted, and without an ability to have that school and have the services there, they won't be able to make a lot of any of these 12 points. They won't be able to demonstrate resiliency, because that's what they need, is resiliency from that program and responsibility. Enough of my soapbox. Thank you.
Chris, then me.
So I actually was going to ask Siri, were you around when we first adopted this, or am I the only one who has been following this for the last forever? The reason I ask is that this has always been something that we struggled with, because there are aspects of how our students grapple with schooling where we'd like them to be resilient, we'd like them to be respectful, we'd like them to have civic responsibility, but we didn't want to just double count the grades. So it's always been this tough thing where you don't want to give a new box to be ticked on every report card at the elementary level for each of these categories. But at the same time, we do want our students to learn how to do that. And so it's been a challenge. And I'm much more interested in understanding from your perspective, Matt, what can we do? And maybe we need to realign these against the SEL standards, but again, it's something where a lot of them we value, but we don't know how to measure. And that's always been the challenge for us. And I'm not going to stand behind these and say, oh, yeah, we're doing a great job of measuring civic responsibility. On the other hand, I will tell you that through the years, I have advocated that forced volunteer work is not volunteer work. So forcing kids to have evidence that they've done volunteer time does not actually prove that they have the ethic, the civic responsibility to do that on their own. So I'm interested in hearing more than discussing these.
I'm actually, Siri, I'm going to let you, since Chris prompted you, I'll let you go and then I'll go. But I can't hear you.
Nope, that's fine. I can go. So to answer Chris's question, yes, I have been around for the time in which we've talked about how to do this. And so the question on these life skills and citizenship, it's starting to recognize from our perspective that perception is probably a big piece. Some of the self-assessment work actually that we did Saturday is perhaps something that we have to be considering here in this environment as well. And going forward, that is not just an outside, it is perhaps an individual. The question I have on this, and just thinking of the work we did with OE14 and the equity work, is how well do these align currently with our student population and our community and where we are at now? I do think there's pieces in here perhaps that could get perhaps changed, enhanced, moved. So I would be interested in being able to pursue some of that somewhat with our community. Is this reflective currently of what we believe in life skills and citizenship at this point in time? And that maybe looking at the SELs might do some of that as well.
When I look at these attributes, I agree these are the attributes. I mean, I can't come up with any more. These are the attributes I care about and I want our students to graduate with. The issue we face with this all the time is how to measure that. But I think the first question we need to think about is are these the attributes? And it sounds like from everyone that yes, they basically are. Maybe there's some ways that we can tighten them up or better align them with state guidance. But the second piece of how to measure it is a little different. So again, all that to say, I'm comfortable with these as the attributes as part of results 3. Mark and then Leah.
Okay. One of the things, Matt, I was thinking of when you were trying to figure out how to measure outside the grade box, if you will. A number of kids, especially, I can only speak for Redmond and for Sammamish at this point because I don't know about the clubs in Kirkland, but the Redmond Kiwanis has 2 key clubs. They're at the high school, and the projects those kids get involved with, and the help they give to various situations. I know that a lot of them will go with us to the homeless shelters and the feeding programs that we do. So that's, and again, those folks that's not exactly forced engagement, if you will. The same way up on the plateau with the Rotarians. The Sammamish Rotarians have a Interact Club at the high school, and they've been very active in helping raise funds for scholarships this last few weeks with the Christmas tree sales. So again, those kids are invaluable when it comes to that. I mean, they're out waving signs and wearing Christmas tree costumes to get people to turn into the crowd, and we'll have some scholarships for kids because of those guys and gals.
I could have sworn I saw another hand up.
Leia's hand was up.
Oh, sorry. You disappeared for a minute. Leah, then Siri.
So I was just going to add that if we're talking about attributes that we would potentially change or add, I was wondering if personal finance education should be included in life skills as an area that we would want all of our students to come out of school prepared and educated in. And I think it does come back to, like Siri was saying, going back to our community and making sure that these are the areas that people see as life skills that they would want their students graduating with.
I like that.
Siri, I think your hand was up. And you're on mute.
Thought I turned it off. Sorry. It's a new computer. I'm trying to work through it. So I do think at some point, so as we go through this piece, I read these attributes, and there are some that I believe align to my personal view, but I am not convinced it aligns to our community's views. And so I do think that feedback is of value to be able to pull in, and I really do think through some of the linkages and discussions we had for the equity work, that came out to me some that we have some broadening of what we have here to be thinking about. And so as we work through the social emotional learning and those pieces, I think that's where this can fall out some.
Director Stewart and Director Carlson.
Okay, two things. One, I like Leia's idea about the personal finance. That's going to require us to have classes, to be quite frank, that some of us have been asking for some time, in personal finance, budgeting, whatever you want to call those kind of a class. And two, to Siri's point, can you give me some idea of some of the ones that you heard of from the during the past linkages that are missing from here, that you might have picked up from some of the groups?
I think some of the global citizenship concepts and a worldview, I think, is not necessarily here as strong as it could be. I think as we look through specific topics like personal finance, you could argue some of those fall out within these in regards to different things. So I do think we have to be thinking of how we potentially address some of the challenges of really being a global thought as we put this forward, because we are in a very global environment of where we are with our students.
And so I actually want to chime in on the personal finance question, but it's definitely something that is related. I think Director Choi's point around personal finance is an important thing. The irony is that this winds up being one of those, where does one put these? Because one could make the argument that a lifetime commitment to fitness and health should be here under personal skills, but that's also our PE requirement. And so it doesn't, just because it's not here doesn't mean it's not anywhere, but maybe it belongs here. I'm comfortable having that discussion.
All right, I'm going to take the pause from hands to wrest control back. But I think that was actually, I mean, thank you for engaging in that conversation, and because here's some of the things that I heard, right? Like, you know, we have values, but some of those values are hard to measure, right? And that's part of the challenge, is things that can be important, and yet how do we want to measure? And some of the conversation is this challenge of this, a lot of the ways in which we measure our policies is a one size fits all, right? We're trying to measure for every student in across the district at typically across at least a grade band. And Director Stewart, you were talking about there's students who engage with and demonstrate these skills. They're part of a community, and they may demonstrate those in service or in part of engagement in a church or a civic organization or outside of the classroom walls. And so we're also we struggle with how do you take kind of a holistic view of things that are values, thinking about how these align with equity. I want the board for us, to hold that. You have a new policy that, and I think Director Bluzey, you were talking about some of the ways which we might interpret these may not be culturally responsive, or maybe not necessarily in complete alignment with our entire community. And so So those are some some challenges around this, thinking about what's not represented here as well. And I'll add one, and this is, I think there's, while this this might be, let's say this may be a fairly comprehensive list, it's also what's the organizing structure for how this drives, how this really drives what we're doing as an organization with respect to how are we intentionally working to help our students build these skills from preschool on through graduation. And so, whereas right now that, there's some of it is like we have to do some sense making through all of this. So what I'd like to do is move us into introducing the state SEL standards. We'll talk a bit about the kind of the history and the process, because I think that's important for the board to kind of understand where did these come from. And then we'll look at the standards themselves, and then we'll engage in some similar conversation of how do those standards how might they help us as the board thinks about the ways in which this policy either is written or is implemented. I see Director Stewart has his hand up.
Matt, before we leave this too quickly, it just occurred to me, the kids that are working as peer tutors in the schools, that'd be another way of measuring within the walls. That way you don't have to worry about trying to get outside information. But some of those kids are just invaluable when it comes to working with the SPED kids and other groups of kids. Yeah,
I completely agree. And then some of the challenges that ultimately that I'll have to try to figure out is, and then how does the board want that to be monitored, and how do we measure that? I know my son has Dr. Carlson referred to, kind of a requirement of like hours. My son lives in a school district that's part of his graduation requirement, and so he does that, and we can point to that, but is that that satisfy kind of the board's interest? So lots of substance for us to talk about. Let's dive into the SEL standards, and hopefully that'll just help move us forward. So all the information that we're going to reference from here on out really is coming from two primary sources. It's either from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction or from CASEL, which is the national organization. It's the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. It's really kind of the national standard bearer for SEL. At the state level, we essentially built our social emotional standards off of CASEL, but we took them and this at a state level represented them in a different manner. But essentially just repackaged it. But there is a strong connection to essentially the national standards based off of the state work. Johnny, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just want to add a little context to the Washington State SEL benchmarks and indicators and how it connects to CASEL. CASEL was a part of that Washington State OSPI committee that helped establish our Washington State standards and benchmarks for state of Washington. And this was released about 4 years ago. That committee met for about 2 years prior to releasing the standards and benchmarks. And they continue to meet on an ongoing basis to identify areas in which they can clarify with schools, as well as help schools understand, or school districts really to understand how it gets incorporated into in a school student opportunity. You're muted, Matt.
All right. So thank you, Johnny. So we've talked a little bit about social emotional learning before. Here's how OSPI defines social emotional learning. So it's a process by which people build awareness and skills. It's how we manage emotions, how we set goals, how we identify those emotions, express them, how we build our relationships, and how that ultimately supports our ability to make decisions that hopefully help us lead successful successful lives. OSPI is really clear about this is not a way to grade. And so we're not grading kids on their SEL capacity, but for at a board level, at a monitoring level, what we're essentially asking is, to what extent are we as a school district preparing our students with these life skills? And so there is a difference between individually assessing a student and for us to say, and to what extent, how are we doing as the adults in the system and helping support an environment that's preparing our students? Whole child, really grounded in the sense that all students can learn, and also that an important part of this is it's built on relationships. So it's a lot of the work that we've been really trying to do. Johnny's been a big part of that, is looking at how do adults build relationships with their students, and how do we help students form relationships with each other. So it is interconnected. Johnny, did I miss anything on SEL that you would want to toss in? So when the state decided that it wanted to adopt or develop or adopt social emotional learning standards, they really grounded that on these 4 principles. They used an equity lens where they thought about that these standards have to really be responsive to the needs of each child, and that based on a belief that each child needs to be able to develop their full potential. The committee that Johnny referenced that has worked is also thinking about how is culture viewed as an asset? It's a resource for learning. It's not a barrier. So it's an asset-based approach, and looking at the ways in which they adopted the standards such that they're culturally responsive and not something that's just a application of a dominant culture, and that then views other cultures perhaps as barriers. Thinking about universal design so that that learning differences are planned for, and that every student is able to access social emotional development. So we'll show a little bit later, there's an actual developmental approach with the social emotional standards that help us think about the learning through different phases. And then thinking about that as trauma informed, and Johnny, I'm going to ask you to, because when we reviewed this, you had thought a little bit more about the trauma informed piece. So you can jump in and just share a little bit more about what OSPI was thinking when they included trauma informed.
Yeah, OSPI was really focused on this idea of strength based and asset based, how students show up to us. One of the key pieces when we look at the standards work and what Matt talked about is it's not about assessing students, right? Do they have it? Do they not have it? But rather, where do they fit in the continuum of development of their social emotional skill sets? And one of the things I would say, and OSPI would say this, is our social emotional skills continue to grow as we grow, and even into our adulthood. And the pandemic has taught us very much so that we need those social emotional skills, and we tap into those social emotional skills. And when those skills don't necessarily aren't necessary, we can't tap into it because our coping strategy, I'll say that our coping strategy doesn't meet the context. We have to then develop new skills to be able to overcome our current context. And that's the part where social emotional learning is so developmental, is that, we develop skills at a certain age or certain experience, and that helps us to move on to the next experience. And, I like to use the peaks and valleys as an example of how we go through peaks and valleys in life, but we rely on our social emotional and learning experience and life experience to be able to overcome some of those peaks and valleys. SEL is very explicit about what those skills are. And that's why when we take a trauma-informed lens, it allows us to tap into students' current strengths to be able to use that to be able to overcome some of those valleys and be able to improve and develop those skills so that they can overcome their next valley or be able to navigate the next valley that they go through. Thanks, man.
Thank you. So I think we're spending a little time about what is OSPI basing these standards on. I think the board has policies OE 14 and OE 10, which have some nice connection to the concepts that the state used when it was developing its SEL standards. A little bit more just about kind of the process, OSPI calls out this connection between SEL and equity, and really about how SEL is, they describe it as a lever for equity. And because we're, aligning SEL with those equity priorities, just as Johnny was talking about, it's an asset-based approach. It's highly relational, and as we know, we look at our relational data, how critical that is. And so for the state, they've really called out that equity work and social emotional learning work are tightly interconnected. Within our district, we have tried to braid those two kind of strands together. So a lot of our professional learning around social emotional learning is in the context of equity, and a lot of our equity professional learning really brings in how do we build relational capacity alongside that. Finally, the process. So the state had a team of experts and practitioners. So there were counselors, teachers, administrators. Johnny referenced CASEL was involved in this. And then they also did statewide stakeholder groups. So they did a combination of focus groups, online surveys, and community forums as they developed these standards. So that was something that there was an intentional process to try to get a variety of voices. And OSPI has a document in terms of all of the steps that they went through for that we won't spend the time with there, but I want the board to understand that they were very intentional over multiple years in developing these standards. They continue to meet, as Johnny said, and actually continue to provide updated guidance documents around implementation for social emotional learning within the state. All right. So before we look at the standards themselves, just want to pause to see if there's any clarifying questions just around some of the process that OSPI did to reach the standards.
Looks like Leah has her hand up. I'm sorry, Director, soon to be Director Choi in about 2 hours, hour and a half.
Thanks. Just real quick, I was wondering whether or not Lake Washington School District participated in the development of any of these. Like, did we have any focus groups or community forums within our school community?
We were, thank you for that question. We were not formally involved as staff. I believe some of some folks connected with the district were involved from a different, not representing necessarily as staff, but as individuals. And we were engaged, we actually were engaged with Eastside Pathways. At the time, they were running a collaborative action network that was focused on behavioral health and social emotional learning. And two of the committee members for the SEL standards were engaged in getting feedback through Eastside Pathways, and we were a part of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so here are, felt like there should have been some drum roll, but here are the Washington State SEL standards. And before I go into them, hopefully you'll notice there's some intentional parallel relationships to them. So the column on one side is all about the self, And the column on the other side is all about the social, the ways in which as individuals that we engage with others. And then you'll also know that the rows also have some alignment. So we start with, in order for us to be able to, we have to be aware of our own emotions, our gifts, where we can grow, and how we might access those. So that's self-awareness. Similarly, for social awareness, we have to be able to think of other people's perspectives, to empathize with others. You'll see OSPI, they call out diverse backgrounds, right? So it's not just being able to take somebody's generic perspective, but to think about how somebody who might have a different cultural context or historical context might come at a situation a little bit differently than they do. So this, so you can see there's this development of awareness both individually and in this kind of collective social situation. And then there's this management, which has, I think the board needs to be aware. Management can have a variety of different connotations and how that can be taken. But it's really is from an individual standpoint, to what extent are we able to be able to regulate our own emotions and thoughts and behaviors, right? Do we have some ability to control how we show up and what choices that we make? Similarly, on a social side, are we able to navigate social situations, interactions, and the types of behavior that we engage with when we're engaging with others? Those first four that I just talked about are all embedded in the CASEL national framework. This next one, self-efficacy, is also in the national framework. And so self-efficacy is about to what extent do I as an individual, can I set goals? Can I motivate myself to try to achieve those goals? Can I stick with it, that I see myself as being capable? The social engagement is the one addition that our state made that is not present when you go to look at the CASEL standards. And this is really about how do we contribute within the well-being of our school and community. And that community could be a classroom community, it could be the school community, or it could be this broader global community. And so it's thinking about how do I as an individual show up and be able to contribute to the community that I'm in, whatever that context is. So that was one completely new addition that our state made. In the other cases, they essentially modified the CASEL framework and then put them in this parallel construct. So I'm going to pause here for just a second, and we'll just so you know, we'll be able to go into each one of these, and I'll ask for any clarifying questions around them. But curious, looking at these, just to have a moment of reflection and take a couple of minutes to share out and thinking about when you look at these, what are the connections that you as a board see or don't see with your results 3 policy?
I'll defer to Siri. Siri, go first.
So my first thought, and just looking at these, is I actually believe they provide a stronger framework and capture many of what we say, but from a better student perspective, I think, than just a list of skills or characteristics. It's more so. I like social engagement. I appreciate that one's been added, because that's sort of the civic engagement we're speaking to, and that component, this allows things to be presented in multiple different ways and still capture it. So that's my first initial take.
And I'd agree that this is bigger picture than the way we had framed them previously. I personally am quite concerned that if you put this in front of the average parent in our community, they're going to be like, what? So I think we're going to need a translation for people who haven't had the time to go through training in what SEL is. So we need to be able to explain these to the community. I would have a very hard time explaining to an average constituent what exactly these specific things are underneath the hood without immediately going back to R3. So.
Mark, go ahead.
To Chris's point, I can see where you're going there, and I think that we haven't really made a major effort on trying to educate families, for that matter, students, on this arena. And I think a better understanding that they have, the better they'll like it. I also, though, think that a lot of the headlines of the last 2 years, 3 years, have scared the devil out of parents, and they want to see their kids more involved, not necessarily just because they want to build a resume, but because they want them involved in the community, because they think that perhaps, anyway I would, that the more involved they are, the less likely they're going to be having some of the usual teen problems, but also they'll have people to connect with. They'll have people to help mentor them, have people to help, if nothing else, a fellow student that may be going through the same thing that they can talk to. If we can marry this to the current anxieties of students as well as parents, I think we could. I think they'd buy into it wholeheartedly. But again, it's going to take an education process. Anything does, and you've got to lay the groundwork first for it. You can't just plop it on them and expect them to wear it.
Director Choi first, and then I'll go.
So I guess I had a clarifying question for maybe Chris and Siri. When R3 was created, so the Washington SEL standards, I think, are a really great framework for SEL learning, right? For addressing specifically social emotional learning. But when I read the life skills and citizenship attributes, it goes beyond just the social emotional learning. It takes into consideration kind of application of academic achievement, right, in the real world. And so I'm curious, when we are looking to the Washington standards as guidance or potential replacement of our life skills and citizenship results, I guess, what was the original intention behind R3? Is it really more of a focus on the social emotional learning side, or is it really encompassing kind of everything that I see right now within the listed attributes?
If I remember correctly, it comes from originally when they put together the mission and vision and then the student attributes. That were the key. There's a 4-page document. I'm thinking of the last page specifically, and that's where the majority of these come from. And they have been made more brief that way, but that was where they came from initially.
And okay, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that we wound up with, at the end of the day, after you had done the academic segments, there were still things that we didn't think had been measured that we thought made for a successful education of a student. And that's really, it became a grab bag for all the things that didn't fit. And yeah, there was a lot of going back and forth, but I don't remember the term SEL being in our vocabulary when we were discussing those. So it's absolutely not dovetailed. It was just an amateur attempt to come up with something that matched SEL. And it is, I completely agree. The first two on there are absolutely polluted with academic prowess. that's something we're already measuring pretty darn well in other spaces. But when you talk about students' resilience, you talk about students demonstrating respect and citizenship, engagement with the community. Those are things that weren't measured in any other way. And so that's how R3 came to be. It was things that we still thought were important, but we didn't feel were captured by what we were measuring the other dimensions.
Chris basically took the words out of my mouth. That's it. And I think we worked on this after I think we took another pass at it after I joined the board too. So I do remember going through these.
This is the third pass since I've been on the board.
And again, I guess basically reiterate what Chris said. I think the idea when we initially put this together, at least last time, I don't think there was, certainly was not. I don't recall any conversation around SEL as a framework. I think it was, these are the attributes we would like our students to graduate with that we don't feel like are necessarily falling into what we're asking for in R1 and R2. So probably broader than the SEL standards, but then I guess also begs the question is, should it be broader?
Right, that was going to be my next point, was if that was the original intention, does it make sense to maybe have it separated?
So my maybe Matt, I have a question for you. I assume that you probably personally have mapped out, compared the SEL standards to ours.
Yep.
Okay. Could you share your thoughts and findings on that?
Yeah, I can. We can jump ahead to that point here. Although I see there's a couple of other hands up, so I don't know if we want to wait before doing that. But
I guess I can wait. I can wait. If that's, I didn't look forward. If that's part of your presentation, then I can hold. I guess my opinion, my take when I look at this is, and I think Director Choi hit it right on the head, is some of the things, in particular, if you look at 3.1 and 3.2 of our R3, are perhaps a little broader, or maybe a little bit different than what is here. And I'd like to have the benefit of Matt's analysis too.
Yeah. Why don't we see the hands went down? So I'm certainly happy to kind of go there. And I think the conversation that you're having too is wrestling with what's the focus of R3, and also thinking about in terms of the board's role of governing through policy, right? And so that the important, Dr. Holman mentioned at the start of this, is that the more that the board is able to provide clarity to the organization, the theory of action is that the more likely the board is to get the results that it wants. And so one of the challenges with R3 is it does sometimes feel a little bit like a grab bag, and so then it's hard to derive what's the through line to the actions that we need to drive throughout the organization, right? And so the SEL standards, while not certainly, they don't encompass everything that the board has in R3 right now as it's currently interpreted. But they do provide us with greater clarity. So I've mapped the standards against R3 two different ways. So I'll show you both of those, and then we can have a little bit more conversation. So let me go to the first crosswalk here. All right. So this is the crosswalk as it's aligned with R3. So you see the 12 policy areas, and then matching against the state SEL standards. You can map all of this SEL standards against this, but you might notice that the first two areas, I put an asterisk next to them, because we're currently interpreting, questioning, and thinking critically and creatively, solving problems effectively at least the way that we're monitoring it is we're really monitoring it from an academic lens, right? So we're using grades. We're looking at these are things that are embedded. Actually, a lot of these, making connections, offering ideas, they're all embedded in the standards of our courses. And so when we first went to look at how would we monitor this, that was part of the kind of the thinking was, well, a lot of these are embedded in the standards of our core courses. Therefore, students who essentially pass our courses have demonstrated that they've met these standards, and particularly for those first two items, really interpreted in that I would say more of that academic lens. But when we think about it, you can see back from the state SEL standards, thinking critically also occurs when you're trying to navigate social situations. When you're trying to navigate thinking about you're doing a self-assessment of how are you going to set a goal and realize that. Solving problems, right? I mean, solving problems in a social situation is just as complex as solving it in an academic discipline. And so if we were to use and map the SEL benchmarks against this, and really use the SEL standards, you are essentially saying we would be interpreting these from a social emotional standpoint more than necessarily the academic standpoint. But as Director Carlson's pointed out, is we're also measuring in R2 all of a lot of the same things are essentially getting measured there as well. And so that does lead, I think, where the board has some opportunities to think about what is it that ultimately, which is why I pose that essential questions, is what's the board's interests as it's thinking about the life skills that we're developing in students. Here's a map the other way. So if you look at the state SEL standards in their 6 categories, and how what the board is thinking about in terms of its current R3 policy, how those might map back against that. And I'm going to I'd like to show one more thing in relationship to kind of thinking about how we might go about monitoring if there was an interest in wanting to use kind of align with the SEL standards. What would be some ways that we would monitor that? So right now we essentially use data that we already have on hand. So we use found data.
Matt, can I just stop you? There was a couple of hands that went up during that last part, and before we jump into indicators, I just want to make sure that potential indicators. I just want to make sure that if anyone has any clarifying questions or thoughts just on where we are in the presentation right now, let's go to that. Director Stewart?
To measure some of these SELs, especially the first two, when we go back to that first chart, to say that they're embedded in the academic skills area, yes, they are, but I would like to see them. I think that's an easy out for us to do it that way and assume that the A student, the B student, has this whipped. I'm not sure, to be quite frank, it's a direct corollary. It is academically, but that doesn't mean they aren't being able to solve personal problems effectively, or being able to think creatively or critically when it comes to a social situation. I don't think that can be identified in an academic grade. You may have some kids that are in the C group and below that are really, when it comes to social issues or social situations, are doing perhaps a hell of a lot better job because they're not as they're more well-rounded. They aren't, their grade point isn't their only focus in life.
Director Carlson and Director Blazner.
So I actually threw my hand up at this point because I didn't want to get too much further under the assumption that all of the R3s I consider to be universal goods. And I want to point to one where I've always worried about it, and I think that some of my fellow board members will appreciate this. Work well with others. Forcing everyone to be a team player as opposed to allowing some people to do individual sports is something I've always fretted over, that you have to succeed by always doing group projects. So, respect and value others I consider an absolute, not optional. But some of these, I feel like the interpretation of them should be highly contextual for the student.
Director Blazner?
So I just want to say, as you look at the crosswalks that were put forward, every single R3 was able to be crosswalked into one of those global frameworks, which I think is really beneficial in the sense that a whole child approach, which is really what this is talking to. You have an academic side as well as a whole child component to this. This touches on that component of it. So appreciate your doing that to be able to see that as we move forward.
Director Stewart, your virtual hand is still raised. Is there anything else?
Yes. In relationship to what Chris was saying, I understand the idea that not everyone has that work well and play with others trait down. But to be quite frank, I think it goes really beyond group activities, whether it's a group project, a group sport. I think it's how well you get along, whether it's in the hallway or whether it's in a classroom, whether it's after school, wherever. I think you're too narrowly defining work well and play with others. How well can they have a conversation without getting ticked off? How well can they have a conversation without jumping to conclusions?
I know. I'm just trying to draw a boundary on an area I don't want work well with others to be interpreted, and that is that introverts have failed because they aren't people.
I see what you're saying. Okay. All right.
Director Blazner?
So with that, I do think by having these Washington SEL sort of frameworks that are broader, it allows you much more flexibility to specifically speaking to what you're speaking, Chris. It's not work well with others necessarily is able to, and I have to go back and look at the social management component. So I think it actually allows for more flexibility than what we currently have in the results 3, because those are much more specific and are often loaded statements in some regards. So
I agree with Director Blazner. Matt, thank you for putting this crosswalk together. It called into greater relief for me that both the SEL standards are broader, but also more focused, I guess, too, if that makes sense. They're broader in how they're constructed, but they are more focused on SEL. That now, the more that I think about that and think about what it is we're trying to measure with R3, or what I would like us to be measuring with R3 at least, it is that. And this sort of the thinking I've always articulated is, well, we measure R3 is we're trying to measure everything that we don't already measure, and that probably is not, in retrospect, upon reflection, is probably not the best framework for thinking about measuring things, is to toss everything into the bag. So this has a lot of appeal to me to having it a lot more focused. Director Stewart, I'll do Director Stewart, and then we'll let Matt continue. And I'm sorry for the break.
Well, I had a question for Matt, to be quite frank. Matt, do you see the state standards as being more difficult or easier to actually accomplish to goals? Because you were saying that the original R3 is so squishy that, how in the world do you measure those? It seems to me that the state standards aren't that much more concrete than the other. They're different, they're nicely worded, but I'm not sure how much more measurable they are.
Well, that's an excellent question. And I see a couple of my colleagues immediately raise their hands as well to maybe help respond. But I'll first, Director Stewart, before I answer that question, thinking about like that context that Director Carlson, you pulled out, work well with others. And like that, how that is that we think about, we're interpreting these value statements in what they mean. They potentially are loaded, or that those interpretations may not be shared broadly, and so one of the benefits of and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring to the board looking at the SEL benchmarks is going back to also what was the process by which there was engagement with a variety of stakeholders, and really looking at kind of those four pillars, thinking about equity and cultural responsiveness because of that, right? Like, so as we're thinking about values, that's wanting to think about what are ones that are essentially that are universal. And there's a strong connection between social emotional learning and success in other areas of life. And so I think there's some good cases to be made for why focusing on SEL. Director Lilliber, you talked about that it also provides the kind of clearer guidance and direction to the organization. And so to get to your question, Director Stewart, about how do we measure it, this is just as challenging as measuring R3 is currently. That said, so there's going to be we're going to have to look at a couple of things of saying our ability to measure this precisely and with objectivity for every single individual student is probably not what we're going to necessarily go for, right? So if we take the view of thinking about civic engagement, every student is going to complete 40 hours of community service, right? Like, we could objectively measure that, but that's not necessarily in kind of an alignment, I think, with what we're trying to do. So I would say a good starting point, and probably just as a starting point, would for us to actually holistically map out perception data. Have our students, which we do in other areas, a little bit for R3 right now. OE10, we use it as well. And so Johnny and I have been working with Panorama to actually map out if we were to want to measure how our students were doing with respect to the SEL standards, not in a way to identify their individual, like, you're good, you're not so good, but to basically have them tell us, how do you think you're doing in these areas? Would we be able to provide the board with student perception data that speaks to all of it? And the short answer is yes, we could. And provide some nice consistency for us to be able to then direct our efforts. And it would be removed from what we're doing right now, which is we're essentially using proxy data, which is problematic because there's so many other things in it that it doesn't drive the level of change that I think that we all would like to see, because it's so unclear. Why are we getting that data? There's so many other factors. So I can show the board kind of how we've mapped out that would be a potentially good starting point. And we can also, there's other ways that we can look at some different ways of measuring that are kind of different than we currently are. But that would be a really, I'd say, a fairly easy starting place. So I saw.
Let's hold questions for just a minute and let Matt press on, and then we'll go back to it.
Dr. Ullman, you still have your hand up? Did you want to jump in on that point?
I'll take the cue. We'll move on.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Okay. Teams changed its layout again. So it's all right. So as you know, we currently work with a organization called Panorama to survey our students, so we have been working with them to look at for board policies such as OE10 and OE14 and R3. What are ways in which we can essentially bring student voice into how we monitor these policies? Because that's really what it is we're asking our students and we're saying, what's your experience? And so they've helped map out the state SEL standards against these are indicators. They're essentially question banks. So each one of these represents about 4 or 5 questions that are asked and allow us to come back with essentially some favorability ratings. There's also a nice developmental approach, because we actually start asking students these questions in the intermediate grades of elementary, so grades 3, 4, and 5, all the way through high school. And so we also can see how we're doing over time, whereas some other indicators, as we think I referenced, like community service, might be things that we essentially, you're only capturing kind of at the end of a student's career. But there is at least one question bank, and then actually, with the exception of self-management, which the indicator is they have a question bank for self-management, there's actually two question banks that map against the state standards. Anything that has an asterisk there is, let's see, we are not currently asking around rigorous expectations. So that would be something that would be new for us. We're not asking about social perspective taking. We are asking, the ones that have asterisks are also ones that we're asking some questions from these for when the board monitors OE10. And so there's some crossover there. But so the short answer is we would be able to at least get student perception data back on this to be able to help assess to what extent do our students feel like they're developing skills in these areas. So I see Director Carlson has his hand up, and so we can pause and have some further conversation or questions around how we might measure or monitor the SEL standards.
So thanks, Matt. This is very helpful. And broadly speaking, from familiar with previous Panorama reports, this would make me even happier with how Panorama is being brought in. So overall, I am supportive of using these. But I did want to, before I forget, to put one last piece in here that I know is not there, because I already flipped through your last 2 slides. And the thing about our R3 was it was always a grab bag, but part of that grab bag was things that we cared about that we knew were not in R1 and R2. A very important one that hasn't appeared here but does relate to SEL, it's just that it's not self-reported SEL, is discipline. And we do monitor discipline as a portion of district performance. We do monitor it for the sake of the students. That is, how much disciplinary action is being taken. Is it appropriate? Is it effective? All of those things are something that aren't addressed in the other R1 and R2. They're important for us at a district level. At least I believe that they are. And I feel that they do fit very nicely underneath even an SEL umbrella.
Yeah, and I'll, if I can, just respond to that. I think so. There's certainly the possibility that we could look at other complementary data elements in relation to R3. And then we also have just around discipline, that's something also that we continue to look at in the context of OE10. And I believe while we haven't set indicators yet for OE14, I believe that might be something that we'd look at in context there as well. And that's the way we're looking at discipline in R3 right now is essentially the absence of engaging in behavior that rises to a level that results in exclusionary discipline is then therefore we count that as a positive that you have the skill. So, so a kid that just, they might have tons of detentions or, other sorts of things, and they're struggling to exhibit, to take responsibility. but they would actually be showing up as having, that we would count them as a win for the purposes of R3. So so I'm not presenting the panorama data as necessarily to represent the entirety of the way we'd monitor, but just to show that there is a way in which we could satisfactorily have a solid foundation and with which to monitor this policy that I know, coming to the board a couple months ago with R3, it's the, we just don't have right now.
Director Stewart and then Director Bleasner.
Matt, I'm questioning this topic, the whole topic, to be quite frank, whether it's from the state materials or from ours. The SEL topic to me is more of a qualitative topic than a quantitative, and so I'm questioning when you're talking about the surveying of the students and doing probably I'm assuming you're doing a quantitative survey of feels right, neutral, extremely happy with it, whatever. To me, that is, it doesn't get to the heart of what the qualitative information you need. I don't know. It seems like it just kind of scratches it, and it makes it more quantifiable than the quality. That said, I don't know another way to do it, but other than have focus groups. But and I don't know if you have enough hours in the day to do all that.
Yeah, I think on that, I mean, when I came to the board last on R3, had said, one way we could go in and essentially you could do some classroom observational data gathering. You could take a cohort of students and really do some intensive qualitative data analysis about the behaviors that they're exhibiting. The challenge with that is it's very resource intensive. And it's certainly you're essentially just kind of getting just a little dipstick throughout that experience. Whereas this approach allows us to ask all of our students and have them self-reflect. Now, it's not perfect, but for the purposes of the board getting a sense of where we are across 30,000 students is. I don't know of a better way to try to satisfy that right now. Johnny, I'm jumping the gun, but did you want to chime in and help respond on that?
And I just want to say the questions that we're asking from our students have been normed and validated over millions of student data points. So they've asked this over and over and over and over to make sure that the question that is being asked in the scale that we're asking students, how students respond, right? The accuracy of that is pretty darn high. And there's examples in which there's other surveys out there that we get a response accuracy rate between 40 and 60%. Panorama has a pretty high threshold in terms of when they ask questions, those questions responses are validated, and the response is pretty high in accuracy in terms of how students are responding to that particular question, grades 3 through 12.
I don't know, Director Liliberty, I don't know if you can help me facilitate.
Sorry. I'll do Director Choi, then Director Carlson.
I was just going to ask, how are the questions created? Whether or not, are they taken from another assessment or another survey that's used nationwide, or are we creating these questions? And then if we are, I'm wondering if we are tapping into some of the resources that are available to us, such as, yes, or, kind of the student mindset, psychiatry kind of areas that can help us really ask the right questions about self-awareness and self-assessment.
Thank you for that question. And these are set questions that was developed by Panorama that has been normed nationally. And Matt can talk a little bit more about when we get results back, they help us understand where we fit nationally as well when our students are responding to the survey. And so again, these data points have been collected and normed across our nation in different districts, different socioeconomic districts. I mean, we're talking about the level of diversity in terms of the data set is very, very large.
So I'm asking more about the effectiveness of the question in giving us the information of whether or not the student is actually achieving X level of self-awareness or, yeah.
Okay, I see what you mean. And that's where it comes to Matt's point is the student perception allows us an opportunity, a window of opportunity, like self-awareness could be how do you know when, and I just using a self-awareness question, not directly from Panorama, but it could be, do you know when to participate in a social group? So let's say that's the question. It allows a school and a district to see, hey, actually we have about 70% of our students that say, yes, they know how to, but it's actually relatively low. That allows us to actually, and to Director Sari's question earlier was, how are these how can we create responsiveness to it or sort of a community context that allows us to be more flexible in how we develop our social awareness practices. And what's great about the Panorama site is it actually provides teachers with strategies to increase social awareness. It provides them with some lessons. It also provides them with some strategies and practices that they can use within their classroom, as well as our department continues to work with schools around creating consistent practices around social emotional learning. And so in terms of like how accurate is it, it's accurate in terms of what the student perceives, and then we build our practices or our response to students is. In some ways, that goes back to the culturally responsiveness, is saying where are students saying they're at, and how do we build a practice or a strategy so that it increases their skill level in social awareness or self-management, so that it meets their social context and their social learning environment.
I'll just add on that too. I think so we've been using Panorama, and I'll say that it's kind of grown organically. We initially started working with the SEL survey because we had an interest in trying to help our counseling program better understand the needs of our students in order to actually drive programming. And then as we looked at how we might monitor, as the board moved to coherent governance, we were essentially sitting on some student perception data, and said, well, this actually could be really helpful. I guess what I'm proposing that we can look at is we're essentially flipping the script, and instead of saying, let's just use what we found data that we have lying around. But if we're really able to align the board's policy and clear about how we're measuring that policy, and then what Johnny just started to describe is, and how is that connected to actually driving the adult behaviors and the actions to take action on that, right? So that we're starting to we're thinking about a system of alignment in order to look at the school is then saying, well, this is what the board values. It's important. We're dedicated to doing this, and we're monitoring, paying attention to this. And that we have this data, and then that also then is going to drive us to think about what is it our student needs. How does that drive our program development at our school levels, at our district level? And so I think it's just important for the board to have that context. Is we actually went independent of a monitoring process. We said there's some value in asking our students these questions for us to better understand. What do we do with the limited resources we have, which is really time with our students, and to say, what is it that our students need? And there's an opportunity for us to then really kind of connect all these pieces within our district. Is I think that's kind of what I'm bringing to the board as a possibility around these. And we know that there will be students that will self-report they are great at something, they've got those skills, and they don't actually have it. And then there's kids who will underreport who might have it, right? So there is a if we're looking at a self-perception tool as a way of actually assessing for each individual student, that's not the right mechanism. And of course, and the state would say you don't actually measure individual students' SEL that way anyway. But if we're saying how are we doing as a whole, right, in serving our 30,000 students, and I could go back and look at developmentally. There's some, this perception data would be aligned developmentally to different examples, because we're going to ask our high school students different questions than we're going to ask our elementary students, because their context is different, and developmentally they're at different stages, so they should have kind of more sophisticated skill development as they get older. So and these would be things that we could come back in more detail for monitoring and dig into Panorama more if we had a need to. But let's see, there's a couple of hands up, and I saw Dr. Holman, you raised your hand too.
Let's do Dr. Holman, and then then Director Carlson, and then somebody else. Okay.
So a few things. We have worked really hard to use quantitative data to measure R3. Like, we have been almost absurdly committed to that type of data for characteristics that really are best understood by observation, interaction, social connection. Like, that's how you truly understand these things. Yet measuring 30,000 students and trying to understand at that level, you can't do that for all 30,000 students. Matt kind of described that. And so another kind of comment that keeps coming back to me, do you remember Randy Quinn when he and Linda came and worked with the board in Leavenworth? One of the things he continued to go back to was a crude measurement of the right thing is always better than an exact measurement of the wrong thing. And so that for R3, to me, it just really speaks to, finding the best approximation of the right data helps the board to understand the performance of the district. But I also, and I don't remember who it was that talked about it, I think there's some other ways for the board to have information around the R3 categories, such as being specific about how we're using our engagement opportunities. Like, what are the linkage sessions, and how are we leveraging those for the board to develop those understandings, actually having those interpersonal discussions with students around their experiences, and if we're strategic, actually asking questions and dialoguing about R3 in a very meaningful way for students and the board. I think there's some observation that could be embedded into this. Either that's staff providing observation, the board provide. So I think there's other ways to also unpack these data that would give the board probably a more holistic view of student results, because this is a results policy at the end of the day. So those are just things I was thinking about.
Director Bleasner, then Director Carlson.
Okay, just two questions. One is Washington State going to be developing their own way in which to measure these standards, or no?
I am not aware of any effort. Johnny, do you have?
It is not. Washington State's primary driver focus right now is really on district implementation. We're really looking at sort of three main categories: is like the adult skill level, the student level skill level, and then what is the sort of explicit skill learning look like, right? And I say explicit skill learning and not explicit curriculum, because there's multiple ways in which we can get at social emotional learning.
Okay, great. So good to know then that we have to define our own. It won't be potentially in the future. The other piece was, I appreciate, Matt, as you spoke to really the alignment of how this is and how this information has helped to shape and form the ability to provide effective services within our schools and programs for our students and address those needs. I am perfectly fine with survey data and perception data, as I think it provides information that you can use over time. The fact that it's validated and done that way is also highly beneficial, that it's a text bank makes it great, and that we're not just creating the questions ourselves. I think that oftentimes can be problematic because we don't have that chance. So I do see a lot of value in being able to use this. And then potentially, as Dr. Holman even spoke to, was the expanding into other options. You know, as you go through these, oftentimes this type of data, which is still quantitative in many ways, most quantitative has qualitative component to it, I would argue. Our grades being one of those that we've discussed at repeated times. That has a strong qualitative perception. Our discipline data has qualitative perceptions built into these. So no data is fine in the community. It all comes with challenges to work within. And so I think we can use it. And then as you break this out, that might lend itself to additional questions that come out that maybe we do focus group with students and then to dive in further or try to figure out some more specific details as you get an overall picture that comes through. I think there's a lot of potential here to really be beneficial from a board side of saying, okay, we're addressing a whole child and really thinking beyond the academic needs, as well as then being able to feed that into Lake Washington and improve the system going forward and doing that. I think there's great potential.
And I'd have to agree with that. I did have a specific question then, sort of under the assumption that, yeah, this is interesting. The question becomes, is this something where the question banks are age scaled, so they're age appropriate from 3rd through 12th grade? Is this something where you can do class of analysis to see how they are, if they're improving, if they're getting worse within a cohort? Or is this something we have to report in aggregate? I don't know the just right answer. I just want to get your take on what you think you can pull off.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet, in part because we've been inconsistent in the questions that we've been asking. And again, that was one of the reasons why Johnny and I went to Panorama and said, we've now been working with you for several years. We've started to write survey data into board policies. We really need to take a more strategic approach, because I think we've had a couple of times where I've had to come back to the board and said, oops, we didn't ask that question, because the primary driver of Panorama has actually really been at the local level. It's been to drive program change, and then we've been just, for the board monitoring, kind of riding their coattails. And this would really say is, can we actually intentionally use our Panorama data over time so that we can get that longitudinal data that we just don't really have right now. Their platform is really robust, and generally which doesn't really require us to do much engagement with their data at all. So to do a class of analysis, I believe that would require us to essentially download the data and do some massaging of it with, and so that's not something I could commit us to at this point, because I don't understand all that's involved in that. But it's not embedded into the Panorama platform so far as I know.
Director Stewart.
Matt, are there other, you mentioned that the state doesn't have any surveying method, if you will. Have you talked with the American Pediatric Psychiatric Association or perhaps DOE for that matter, to see if they've gone down this road before?
There are other, and John, this is Johnny. I'm looking at you. You can't tell me because we're not in the same room, but I'm looking at you because this falls more into some of your areas expertise. There are other surveys and tools that are out there, and again, we went with Panorama partly because they have a national scope. we're able to get some relationship with respect to other districts. Because, as the board knows, that sometimes you come back and you say, we got 65% of our kids said yes. But sometimes that's really good. That might put you in the top 5% of the country. It just depends on the questions that's being framed. So, and they had a nice, again, because we're also trying to drive actual practice within the schools. And so they had a nice platform that's really usable for our counselors and principals and teachers. And so there are other options out there. I'm not aware of one that is as comprehensive as Panorama platform is right now.
Yeah, Panorama is just their bandwidth and their ability to help school districts be able to work through the data and just the questions that they are able to ask in Norm. Also, to your question about have we reached out to some of the other sort of organizations that have an area of expertise in this, and some of those areas is really diagnostic focus, and with the OSPI's mandate or requirement around SEL is this is not an assessment. And so if we were to use some of the other assessments, and I'll say assessments versus survey, because they really are assessments that is focused on looking at, is there a deficit? Is there something that we need to diagnose here? And that's something that we don't want to lean towards because of the OSPI standard saying, what are some assets and how can we build protective factors? Because if we look at building protective factors, we can actually mitigate some of the risk factors and develop skills. Whereas some of the assessments that have been developed with some of these communities have been really focused on what are areas in which there's deficit, and it becomes more diagnostic than sort of skill and asset focus. And it's individual focus versus sort of like how can we support 30 students in a classroom, 25 students in a classroom, move towards more, emotional regulation, or, one of those pieces is, I think, as strong as sense of belonging. How can a teacher help build a sense of belonging in their classroom? That's climate and culture within the classroom. With a diagnostic tool, it doesn't really get at it. A student might not feel a sense of belonging and might actually come up as depressed, right? Isolation might be and we might be targeting, I would say, we'd be targeting the top of the iceberg instead of the bottom of the iceberg, where it's really that sense of belonging is more environmental. So how can we change the environment so that the sense of belonging at the tip of the iceberg isn't signs and symptoms of depression, right? So that's why we haven't engaged in some of these other organizations that solely kind of focus on assessment, where we really want to do surveys.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Madam, I was going to invite you to go to the last slide because I have some comments on. You have 2 questions for discussion at the end. I didn't realize until tonight that I can so with some of these presentations can flip ahead and all right, I can cheat. So for the last slide, the last question. Well, my answer to the first question is I don't need anything further with respect to the SEL standards. Thank you for the presentation. It's illuminating. Potential next steps for consideration of SEL and R3. I wanted to offer up my thoughts. I am comfortable with the board starting the process of rewriting R3 to match the SEL standards that are presented, and I would think we formed a policy committee a few months ago. And we have to maybe think about how we're going to now reformulate that policy committee or repopulate it. But this would seem to me like this would be a good first step is to have that work done in the committee within a check-in with the board, maybe another study session in a couple months or so. And then maybe at the same track, staff could keep working on the indicators for the rewrite. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
And I think at this stage, that's questions are out to the board as in terms of what next steps, or if there's other information you need from Johnny or I.
Was it that bad of an idea that I stunned everyone into sign? Okay, there we are. Director Carlson.
No, actually, you said what I actually felt needed to be said. I mean, broadly speaking, I'm also comfortable with revising R3 to be parallel to the SEL standards rather than our own ad hoc thing that we've been living with while waiting for such a thing to happen. The only concern I have after tonight's presentation, I believe that I'd love to see more detail on trying to bring things through. But for Matt, since you're talking, you make a really good point. Using an instrument we're already using for something else doesn't make this an excess burden on the system, teachers and or students. This is a good thing. I am worried about our needs starting to trump the needs of the counselors. I still want the counselors asking the questions they want answered, and then we'll fill in the blanks with our standard set. So that's the only modest concern I have. I believe you're quite good at handling these things, so I'm not real worried about it. And the last thing is just what I had mentioned about, I do believe that, yes, you're right. Just because someone isn't in exclusionary discipline doesn't mean they are successful, but it is one of the only things that we really do have as a metric that's an external. Because I was thinking about, there's your point about some people are harsh self-graders, some people are easy self-graders. The external validation of how are these trends, if discipline trends were consistent with trends in self-management, which is sort of the one I feel is the most logical connection, then I would be quite pleased to see them parallel one another. If people think they're doing better at self-management, and we're seeing with systematically, on average, our students are doing better, that would be very good. So overall, thank you very much. Very informative, and I am comfortable moving forward under this semi-assumption that we need to rewrite and sort of use the pathway that you've laid out for us.
Director Bleasner.
And I would agree with what was said prior. I think the information provided was excellent, and understanding sort of the connection and the value already that the data provides into the system, and then how do we use it and how we can sort of expand that, I think is great. The one question.
You muted yourself mid-sentence.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
As we look at doing this, what role for community feedback should be put there and brought forward in that discussion as we go forward? That would be my one piece to think about, and I don't know, because it is about skills with students and those pieces, and our community would definitely have opinions on that. So are we missing something? And I know that the SEL, they did a whole statewide piece as well, so you could argue that it has been done from that side. I'd just sort of I don't have an answer as to what that would be, but that would be an interest of mine to pursue.
Dr. Holman?
I wonder if the policy committee kind of puts together a package of what we believe would move this forward, along with proposed community engagement.
That makes sense to me. Everyone was essentially nodding there. Anything else for any other questions? Anything else for the good of the order? Matt, did we answer your questions, or at least provide enough feedback where there's a sense of a direction from the board that the board would like to go?
I certainly did. I appreciate the conversation and the dialogue. It's just so helpful to have clarity and direction from the board, and so I'm happy to work with the policy committee and continuing to develop and move this forward.
Okay. Director Carlson?
So as we're moving forward on that, the one thing I think we don't generally have a translation requirement from educrat to parent. But in this particular case, I really think that a half pager on translating SEL terminology and just exemplars, in some ways our crosswalk, most of the things that we had in R3, a parent can understand, and it might help parents who are trying to understand, what are you talking about with SEL for this R3? Oh, well, here's how. But really a quick little map for parents to follow us who haven't had the benefit of being brought along one step at a time would be great.
I completely agree with Director Carlson, and I'd say that I hope that if possible, our policy would be in a little more plain English than the state's standards. I was during the slide was up. I was Googling terms to try to understand some of them. So, Director Stewart.
Yeah, I think to preemptively do it before we engage the public to go ahead and translate those questions beforehand, as opposed to trying to let them translate it as they're answering the question. Otherwise, they're going to give up and close the book. So I would say, put it into English, if you will, as opposed to education ease.
Okay. All right, so we'll move forward with that understanding. Anything else for the good of the order? Great. Matt, thank you so much for pulling that all together and taking the lead on that. This is exciting and hopeful.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad Johnny joined too to handle the really tough questions. So thank you, Johnny, for spending the evening with us.
So I've closed down my agenda, but I believe we've reached the end of the agenda for tonight's study session. Yes. Following this meeting, the board will meet at 7 p.m. again remotely. It's broadcast similarly both through the district's website and telephonically with the same phone number provided earlier. And so we will see everyone back here at 7 p.m. Leah, just so you know, there's a different link to access the Teams meeting for 7 p.m. Okay, great. You're a pro. It took me a while to figure out. All right, excellent. So I'll see everyone back here at 7 p.m. And this meeting is adjourned.